No Man's Sky is a game that evokes extremely strong emotions on both sides of the spectrum. The game's 2016 release was plagued with mass criticism for its underwhelming, shallow and frankly misleading experience that left a lot to be desired. Hello Games and particularly Sean Murray were at the mercy of thousands of pissed off gamers that accused the company of false advertisement and straight up bullshitting in order to sell one of the most anticipated video games of all time. The initial release of No Man's Sky delivered a product that was a far cry from the utopia shown to us all the way back in 2014. It was a game that seemed unfinished, with a long list of missing features, poor gameplay designs and a missing gameplay loop that created a hugely disappointing experience that many still hold close to their hearts to this very date, nearly 3 years since the game first launched. So when trying to answer this question, we have to break down No Man's Sky into some main subsections: missing content, development and gameplay. It's tough because I feel like No Man's Sky will always be a game that's judged harshly and in a lot of ways unfairly because of its launch, when in reality the game has in many ways exceeded what was promised way back in 2016. But if we begin with the age-old missing or promised content that we never saw, we can first see just how much No Man's Sky has changed and developed in the 2 and a bit years since it released. Pre-release No Man's Sky and current day No Man's Sky are, in my eyes, two very separate games, and not just because of features that we still don't have in the current build of the game. Sean Murray's initial vision of No Man's Sky was a lonely solo exploration that puts into perspective just how intimidating and scary a universe can be. You were just one speck of sand on a mile-long beach, yet you had all the beaches in the world to conquer. And this game's original intention does still remain in the current version of No Man's Sky, but in the 2 years since the game's release, a lot has changed to make No Man's Sky a game that's partially sculpted by Hello Games themselves, but also the players who feedback on what they want to see, how they want to see things implemented, and what they ultimately want No Man's Sky to be. The days of pre-release No Man's Sky will unfortunately never come back, at least as we saw it all those years ago, and that's because the game has evolved. The game can never be what we were shown because it has gone beyond the so-called E3 build. This is why we now see a major focus on multiplayer, realistic colours and a much more social and alive universe instead of this cartoonish, lonely ass acid trip that No Man's Sky once was. Think of E3 No Man's Sky as a separate game, a pre-alpha that we won't ever get to play. What we have in the present day is a game that far exceeds the quality, gameplay and polish of the infamous E3 build, and as consumers, we simply have to let go of this attachment to this long gone old version. But content wise, the long list of missing features has near enough dwindled down to only a few minor additions. Things like planetary rotation, asteroid landings and bathing animals are still not in the game, but these are features that seem minor compared to what is in the game. Major content updates have introduced what we all wanted from day one No Man's Sky, as in full multiplayer, varied planets, base building, vehicles, a better story, refined inventory management, new ways to earn money, ringed planets, better cloud and water textures, class-based multi-tools and ships, enhanced underwater environments. The list at this point in time is twice the size of the missing features list of summer 2016. Content updates over the years have added in what we were sold on at launch, but these added features hold surprises and more depth than what was originally advertised. These old features then come bundled with brand new features that are fresh off the development grindstone, so we are never getting a what we deserved update. Think of it as being told by your parents that for Christmas you'll get a PlayStation 4 console, but when the big day comes, you only get socks and Link's Africa. You're disappointed and somewhat pissed off at your parents for not delivering on what they said they would do, I mean, anyone would be, and you hold this grudge until next Christmas. But when next Christmas rolls around, not only do you get a PlayStation 4, but you also get Red Dead Redemption 2 with it. You also get an extra controller, a year of PSN, and a PS VR headset to top it all off. The extra year waiting and being angry was worth it because your parents finally delivered on what they said to you a year ago, but what they have given you now is 10 times better than what you should have got last year. That is No Man's Sky put simply. It's now the game that was sold to us, but even better. But you may argue, Dan mate, the game still doesn't look like E3. Where are the crazy planets with interesting animals and dense forests? Well, consider this for a second. Would you rather play E3 No Man's Sky that likely had even less working gameplay features than release day No Man's Sky? Or would you rather play modern day No Man's Sky that yes, doesn't have Area 5, but does have multiplayer, terrain tessellation, and 6 major content updates? E3 No Man's Sky looks pretty, but it doesn't actually have a game in the game. So when it comes down to the generic, oh, but it still has miles to go to it looks like E3 argument, why would you honestly want E3 No Man's Sky? It would be interesting as fuck to play, and I'll admit that, but maybe only for half an hour to see some cool planets. Inevitably though, you'd be so bored of it because there is nothing to do. There's no base building, no character customization, no vehicles, no multiplayer. It would be an even shittier version of Day 1 No Man's Sky. So in terms of missing content, No Man's Sky in its current state has passed the test. A huge array of famous cut features are now in the game, and they are extremely refined compared to what they would have been had they been released in 2016. If you are a person who won't buy No Man's Sky because you believe the game still isn't what we were sold on, then you simply need to find a better reason not to buy it. I'm pleased to say that that old argument is no longer valid, so we can finally stop going on and on about the intense amount of lines of code that never found its way into the game. So with the elephant in the room taken care of, let's now talk about the development of current day No Man's Sky, and in particular, how Hello Games act now compared to how they acted in August of 2016. To put it bluntly, modern day Hello Games is like a wise grandfather. They've lived through some tough shit, and they've gained incredible experience from the woes in their lives. Hello Games in 2018 are very much the same reserved, polite and charismatic development team that they were, but they're so much more grounded. The days of radio silence are a thing of the past, with their Twitter being much more active with game updates, season greetings and fan artwork. They still aren't the type of people to share every nook and cranny of their development process, but they won't ever be like that. That is simply how they are. They also don't promise anything or hype anything up until it has basically been released. They said it themselves that they like to make rather than talk, and this prevents them from building expectations that may not be matched. However, the most important thing to remember is that Hello Games now talk, even if it isn't as much as they could do. For the first time ever, Hello Games released a basic roadmap a few months back with their basic plans on huge 2019 updates and a full community-driven survey to give them an idea of what the community wants to see added into No Man's Sky. This kind of behaviour is how modern day Hello Games act. They no longer just develop and release, they talk about what they're making and ask for the players' input. No Man's Sky is very much the community's game as it is Hello Games' game. A recent example is the Visions update, which released a few months back. Visions was a moderate sized content update that focused on addressing a huge ask of the community, which was more colour and vibrance. I made videos on this topic, community members tweeted about it, and as a result of this, Hello Games added in exactly what we wanted, and in a damn short time as well. The short and long of it is, if the community are vocal about something, Hello Games will listen. Even though they won't explicitly say, Dan, we watched your old aesthetic video and created visions based on it. It is abundantly clear that they're deeply involved with the community, even if it is as covert as a fucking FBI agent. And what I've said just now is only the beginning. I haven't even touched on the continued free updates the game receives every other month, the smaller updates in between these, and the new community events that aim to busy us until we get our hands on brand new content. So in case you're unaware, let us delve into how this all works. No Man's Sky is a rarity in its development because it is one of the few games left that don't prioritise revenue over enjoyment. In an age where EA push out the same game yearly but with different numbers of players, and Activision sell us full price games with missing content that is then later sold to us further down the line, it's a strange and refreshing feeling to find a title that includes free content. But not only free content, absolutely zero in-game purchases like loot crates, skins, or downloadable content. In an age of underage gambling through keys and crates, it is truly orgasmic to have a game that is simply a game and not a dolled up slot machine. A game that gives you your money's worth even though it has been years since it released, and is ultimately a game that doesn't gain anything from releasing content but fan service and a feeling of developer satisfaction. And who would have guessed that this absolute utopia of a game would be No Man's Sky, a game that was slammed for being a money whoring arsewipe of a title at launch. To put things into plain English, buying No Man's Sky at full price will give you your money's worth instantly, and this isn't even accounting for the added content further down the line. Where games would usually sell you what you should have got at launch, No Man's Sky just gives it to you for free. No catch, no disadvantage, you just get some extra content without paying a single fucking penny. This can be seen in Hello Games' efforts at releasing a major content update every few months, with the Abyss update and Visions being the two most recent. But the next update, which many considered to be the true turning point of No Man's Sky, an update that quite literally remastered the game, was 100% free. I've said it 1,000 times already, and I'll say it another 1,000 times, No Man's Sky will give you support for the foreseeable future. And this is why it angers me so much that people cannot see through the game's infamous past to the beautiful little rainbow that current day No Man's Sky is. A game that reminds me of the golden days of gaming, where money came second to enjoyment and genuine fun. It's a breath of fresh air that's solidified by 3 major content updates, weekly community updates that are just given to us because Hello Games don't want us to go empty until a new one drops, and the frequent bug fixes and adjustments to what we already have. Simply put, the game is a project, a labour of love, and Hello Games ultimately update No Man's Sky not because they want your hard-earned cash, but because they love making games, and they truly want No Man's Sky to be a game that is a perfect and innocent game. We're in an age where shit shows like Fallout 76 and Battlefield 5 dominate the market. And finally, we move into gameplay. So modern day No Man's Sky is still very much the game it was in 2016, and this is where some of my criticisms do come through. So to put it bluntly, if you didn't enjoy the gameplay loop of No Man's Sky when it released, then chances are you probably won't like the gameplay loop of No Man's Sky in 2019. What many complained of back in 2016 was that infamous grind, the endless managing of resources and units that made the game feel less about exploring the unknown and more about watching figures like a fucking accountant. Even though the game was sold on being open and available to play however you want, the core gameplay loop had deep roots in grinding and time sinking. In an ironic turn of events, the freedom that you so desperately wanted could only be unlocked through following the game's extremely narrow and prescribed gameplay, something which does still exist to this day. The game's core has remained largely largely untouched. You mine shit to sell and use those units to buy a better multi-tool so you can mine quicker to sell more shit and get more units. The cycle is still there, and that occasional sense of why the fuck am I doing this is also still there, but it is a lot less apparent than what it was before. With the introduction of base building and a brand new farming system, you can now earn money from simply growing plants. You can also earn money from the new procedurally generated mission board or taken down bounties. Instead of having 1,000 pits of emerald to mine, you now have other options to choose from. This does most definitely break up the monotony of gameplay, but ultimately the loop has been untouched since day one. There's a lot of nice icing and flowering on the surface to make it look pretty, but deep down you're still basically doing what you did in 2016, and that definitely does need to change. No Man's Sky currently has an issue where every added feature basically involves earning money somehow. For example, the newly added archaeology expeditions are only done for financial gain. There isn't any other incentive whatsoever, and this is ultimately what holds No Man's Sky back. The game's obvious push for you to find shit, sell shit, and buy shit. It's essentially a capitalism simulator, but in space. The tough part though is that this isn't necessarily a bad thing depending on who you ask. Some people like myself really enjoy the grind, and seeing your gear gradually improve does fill you with some dopamine to make for some genuinely time-consuming gameplay. But then sometimes you just get this overwhelming feeling of pointlessness, like you should be exploring, but you really want a new ship, so you have to sell some more minerals to get that ship. In terms of what you do and why you do it, the answer is always money. Money and exploration. If you don't follow the game's core loop, you will find enjoyment in stuff that isn't really prescribed to you. Stuff like finding a cool landscape or an interesting looking tree. No Man's Sky's enjoyment really comes from how you perceive the game. If you just want to do what the game tells you to do, then you'll likely be grinding forever and only getting enjoyment from buying new stuff instead of making your own enjoyment out of building a home or naming a tree after your dead relative. No Man's Sky's fun is often found in your own imagination and not the code which creates the game. So to sum it all up, No Man's Sky is essentially what it was in 2016. It's a game that focuses on making you feel small and insignificant in an infinite universe. What you do in the game is now much more varied than before, but to some extent, you're still very much doing what you always did. The game has improved beyond my wildest expectations, but I strongly believe that for Hello Games to really change things up, they have to solve the core gameplay, what you actually do and your motivations for doing so. Until that is addressed, many people will likely get bored of the experience and play something with a much more pressing goal and reward system. But that is the very issue, because No Man's Sky isn't built for everyone. It isn't a game that appeals to the masses by including a little sprinkle of everything. It's very much a niche title that only some people will find enjoyment in. It's like the space equivalent of Viscera Cleanup Detail or Euro Truck Simulator. It will only be fun if you like cleaning or driving a fucking truck. Not everyone in the world likes that. No Man's Sky doesn't play it safe like most modern games. It doesn't ensure the gameplay is streamlined and designed in such a way that it appeals to every person for maximum revenue. And I like that because, as I've said many times before, the game does not resemble the modern day industry. It's bold, it's unique, and it benefits from a development cycle that most games don't follow because it quite simply isn't profitable for the developers. But remember that Hello Games are an indie studio. They're a team of 20-something blokes and gals in Guildford, about 20 minutes away from me. They don't hide behind their stage presentations and expensive suits. They resemble actual fucking people. People like you and me that are just talented in making video games. So yes, No Man's Sky is 2000% worth a purchase in 2019, and I want to end this video with one simple statement. Why is it that people will continue to hate Hello Games for an underwhelming product that released in 2016, yet will continue to side with Bethesda and EA for making piss poor titles with microtransactions, broken mechanics, and shady business practices? Hello Games were and still are an indie studio of 20-something people, yet Bethesda are a multi-million AAA company that made fucking Skyrim, yet ballsed up Fallout 76 incredibly. The fact that gamers nowadays tend to side with the corporate commanders like EA, Activision and Bethesda, yet continue to hate Hello Games, who have actually proven themselves instead of selling what they should have included in the game for even more money, is an exact showcase of everything wrong with modern day consumers. So instead of buying the next Call of Duty game or FIFA 20, why not buy No Man's Sky that isn't owned by a cunt in a $7,000 suit who's charging you for scraps of a game that you deserve? I would wake up and play No Man's Sky.